Archangel Michael says, I need you to trust me. You are the only one who can do this. Not the only one heaven has ever spoken to. The only one who can take this specific step, in your specific life, right now. Stop scrolling. Read slowly. This one is different. Something in you already sensed that the moment you stopped. Trust that. Here is the truth. There is a specific step waiting on you, and only you, because it lives inside your specific circumstances, your specific relationships, your specific history. No one else can take it for you. Not because you are cosmically special above everyone else. Because it is yours. Think about what specifically came to mind the instant you read that first sentence. Name it. Even silently. That is what this message is about. Here is why this feels urgent right now. Clarity like this rarely stays this sharp for long. Give it a few hours, and the noise of ordinary life will start pulling it back under the surface. This is the window. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Right now, while it is still clear. Archangel Michael says, I am not asking you to trust me blindly. I am asking you to trust what you already know, the thing you have been circling for longer than you want to admit. Here is something worth understanding honestly. You have been waiting for someone else to fix this, solve this, start this, finish this. Waiting for the right moment, the right permission, the right feeling of readiness. That readiness was never going to arrive from outside you. It had to come from inside, and it is arriving right now, in this exact sentence. Think about how many times you have almost taken this step before. A conversation you rehearsed and never had. A decision you almost made and quietly postponed. A truth you almost admitted and then buried again. Each time, something pulled you back. Fear. Doubt. Exhaustion. Whatever it was, it does not have to win again today. Here is something worth sitting with. You are not being asked to fix everything. You are being asked to do the one thing only you can do, the one piece that has been sitting there, waiting specifically for you, because no one else has the standing, the history, the relationship, or the responsibility to do it in your place. Consider what that specific thing actually is. Not vaguely. Specifically. Whatever surfaced, hold it. Do not let it slip away the way it has slipped away before. Here is why this particular truth feels heavier than most advice you scroll past. Because it is true. Because deep down, you already know that no one is coming to do this for you. Not because you are alone in the world. Because this particular piece belongs to you. Think about what has made this so hard to accept until now. Maybe it felt safer to wait for someone else's permission. Maybe admitting it was yours to do meant admitting you had been avoiding it. Maybe you were simply exhausted, and one more responsibility felt like too much to carry. All of that is understandable. None of it changes the truth. Here is something worth understanding about why only you can do this. Not because heaven forgot about everyone else. Because this specific situation is shaped by your specific history, your specific relationships, your specific voice. Someone else stepping in would not carry the same weight, the same authority, the same meaning. This is yours to finish. Here is a question worth sitting with honestly. What would it cost you to keep waiting another year? Picture that year clearly. Not vaguely. Specifically. Does that picture unsettle you? Good. Let it move you instead of freezing you. Here is what taking this seriously actually looks like. Not everything solved today. One honest step. A conversation you have rehearsed silently too many times. A decision that has circled long enough. A truth that deserves to finally be spoken. Name your one step. You already know what it is. Here is something that arrived unplanned, something not part of this message when it began. Archangel Michael has more to say. He says this: the fear that has kept you from taking this step is not evidence that you are unqualified. It is evidence that this actually matters. Fear this specific rarely shows up over things that do not. Sit with that for a second before continuing. Here is something worth understanding about trust in this particular moment. Trusting Archangel Michael here does not mean trusting some external force to hand you an outcome. It means trusting the part of you that already knows what needs to happen, the part you have been quietly overriding for longer than you meant to. Here is something worth naming honestly about doubt, since it likely arrived somewhere in this reading. A voice saying this message is too general, that it could not possibly be speaking to you specifically. Notice how quickly that doubt showed up. Ask yourself honestly whether it reflects careful thought, or whether it is simply protecting you from finally admitting what you already know. Here is something worth understanding about readiness. You have been waiting to feel completely ready before acting. That feeling rarely arrives first. It arrives after you begin, not before. Stop waiting for a feeling that has not shown up yet. Move anyway. Here is a warning about the exact excuse that will try to talk you out of this. It will sound calm. It will sound reasonable. It will say, once things settle down, once I have more energy, once the timing feels right. Timing rarely arrives on its own. You create it, by choosing to act before you feel fully ready. Here is something worth understanding about support throughout this. You were never meant to carry the outcome entirely alone, even if the first step is yours alone to take. Think of someone honest enough to tell you the truth and steady enough to stay beside you while you do this. If no one comes to mind immediately, consider that professional support exists precisely for moments like this. Asking for help is not surrender. It is wisdom. Here is something about the shame that may already be surfacing, shame about how long you avoided this, shame about needing a message like this one to finally notice it. Release it now. Shame does not move you forward. It only adds unnecessary weight to an already heavy moment. You are human. This pattern is common. What matters now is your very next choice. Here is what shifts once you finally take this step. Not instant peace, necessarily. But something lifts. The exhausting effort spent avoiding it disappears, and that same energy becomes available again, for something better than fear. People who finally do this describe feeling lighter almost immediately, even before the situation is fully resolved. That lightness is real. It is waiting for you too. Here is a final warning before this message moves toward its close. If you close this and change absolutely nothing, the moment passes quietly. The clarity fades. The noise returns. This exact opportunity slips back into the background, the same way it always has before. Do not let that happen again. Before you continue with your day, take one slow breath. Name, specifically, what only you can do. Name, specifically, one small step you will take before this day ends. This does not need to be dramatic. It needs to be real. Trust that this message reached you today for a reason. Something in you already knew that the moment you stopped scrolling. Here is something worth naming clearly about specific things this message might be speaking to. Maybe it is a relationship only you can repair, because only you carry the specific history and love required to actually reach that person. Maybe it is a decision only you can make, because only you know the full weight of what is genuinely at stake. Maybe it is a truth only you can finally speak, because you are the only one who has been carrying it. Maybe it is simply forgiving yourself for something no one else is even asking you to still carry. Whichever one lands closest to your truth, notice it. Do not look away from it this time. Here is something worth understanding about why this particular moment will not repeat in quite the same way. Urgent nudges like this one rarely arrive twice in identical form. The next version, if it comes, may not be gentle. This is still the gentle version. Take it seriously while it remains one. Here is something about the people around you who may already sense what you have been avoiding, even without a single word spoken between you. They notice the tension in your voice. The distance in your eyes lately. How quickly you change the subject. They are waiting for your honesty, not to catch you failing, but because they love you and genuinely want to help, if only you would finally let them close enough. Here is something worth sitting with about the version of you standing on the other side of this. Picture them clearly. Lighter. Steadier. No longer exhausted from pretending everything is fine. That version is not fantasy. It is simply what happens once avoidance ends and honest effort begins. They are waiting for you too. Here is something worth understanding about the specific weight this message has been circling back to, that sense that everyone else seems to have things figured out while you alone struggle silently. That perception is almost always false. Nearly everyone carries something unfaced, something quietly hidden beneath a carefully managed exterior. You are not uniquely broken. You are simply human, exactly like everyone else pretending otherwise. Here is something worth understanding about the specific words you are using internally right now. They shape whether this becomes a genuine turning point or simply another forgotten reflection. If your internal voice feels harsh right now, consider softening it, even slightly, even just for today. You do not need to fully believe every kind word about yourself immediately. You simply need to stop reinforcing the harsh ones. Here is something worth understanding about honesty and freedom. Nearly every genuine freedom people describe experiencing traces back to a moment of honest confrontation with something previously avoided. Freedom did not arrive before the honesty. It arrived because of it. Whatever freedom you are hoping for, whatever relief you are quietly seeking, it is waiting directly on the other side of exactly the honesty this message has been asking of you. Here is something worth understanding about anyone who looks up to you, if such a person exists in your life. They are watching how you handle difficulty, whether they ever say so or not. What you model for them teaches more than any words ever could. Consider what you want them to learn from watching you today. Here is something worth understanding about the specific cost of silence in relationships. Unspoken truths do not simply vanish. They accumulate quietly, creating distance even in relationships that once felt easy and close. If your particular avoidance involves another person, consider how much distance has already grown between you, distance built entirely from things left unsaid. That distance can shrink again, but only once honesty finally enters the space where silence has been living. Here is something worth understanding about physical symptoms specifically, if this is the area this message has been speaking to. Symptoms ignored rarely resolve on their own. They stabilize temporarily or slowly worsen, and either way, not knowing creates a quiet, constant hum of anxiety draining your daily peace. Getting answers, even uncomfortable ones, tends to feel far better than continuing to live inside uncertainty. Here is something worth understanding about money and hidden shame. Financial avoidance rarely stays contained to finances alone. It bleeds into self-worth, into relationships, into how safe someone feels simply moving through an ordinary day. If money is what you have been avoiding, know that facing the actual numbers, however uncomfortable, tends to feel far less frightening in reality than the vague dread of not knowing feels in your imagination. Here is something worth understanding about grief that was never fully processed, if that is what has been quietly sitting beneath everything else. Grief postponed does not vanish. It waits, sometimes for years, surfacing sideways as irritability, exhaustion, or a persistent sense that something is wrong without an obvious cause. Giving that grief space now, even years later, is never too late. It is simply overdue. Here is something worth understanding about this specific moment becoming a memory you look back on someday. Two versions of that memory are possible. In one, today was the day nothing changed. Another ordinary day folded into countless ordinary days where something important quietly slipped by unnoticed, again. In the other, today is the day everything shifted. The day you finally stopped, finally listened, finally took one honest step instead of another day of looking away. You decide which version becomes true. Right now. Not tonight. Now. Here is something worth understanding about the voice that will try talking you out of this. It will sound reasonable. It will say, not the right time, or, I will handle it later today instead. That voice has already won too many times. Notice it. Thank it for trying to protect you. Then move forward anyway. Here is something worth remembering about old excuses when they return, because they will. You do not need to silence them permanently. You simply need to act despite their presence, the same way you would keep walking even while nervous, even while unsure, even while afraid. Courage was never the absence of fear. It was moving forward anyway. Here is something worth understanding about grace throughout this entire process. You will not do this perfectly. There will be days you slip back into old avoidance. That does not erase the progress already made. Begin again. As many times as it takes. That is not failure. That is exactly how real change actually happens. Here is something worth remembering about the specific weight you have been carrying. It has been heavier than you have let yourself admit, even to yourself. Carrying it silently has cost you more than you realize. Setting even a small piece of it down today will feel like relief you did not expect. Trust that relief when it comes. Here is something worth understanding about faith throughout this specific moment. You do not need complete certainty about how everything turns out. You simply need enough trust to take the next step without seeing the entire staircase. That is what faith actually looks like in practice. Not blind hope. Simply enough trust to move forward one step at a time. Here is something worth understanding about the people who will notice your change before you fully notice it yourself. They will see you breathing easier, speaking more freely, carrying yourself differently. They may not know exactly what shifted. They will simply notice that something did. Here is something worth understanding about the specific significance of this exact moment, whatever day it happens to be for you. This particular day did not have to include this particular message. Something aligned to bring it to you exactly now. Do not waste that alignment. Here is one more thing worth understanding before this message reaches its true close. The urgency you received today was never meant to frighten you into paralysis. It was meant to wake you gently enough to actually move, rather than freeze under the weight of fear. You are not frozen. You are reading this. You are still here. That alone proves you are ready for what comes next. This message reached you today for a reason. Trust that. Carry it with you. And when you are ready, not before, not because anyone told you to, but when you are genuinely ready, take your next step. Deep down, you already know what that step is. Here is something worth understanding about the specific role your daily environment plays in either supporting or blocking this particular change. If your surroundings stay filled with constant noise, constant distraction, constant demands pulling your attention in every direction, genuine reflection becomes nearly impossible to access consistently. Consider what small adjustment to your environment might create even a few minutes of genuine quiet each day, quiet enough to actually hear your own honest thoughts rather than only the noise competing for your attention. Here is something worth understanding about the specific role written reflection can play throughout this process, since thoughts left entirely unspoken and unwritten tend to remain vague, slippery, easy to lose track of. Consider keeping even brief notes as you continue engaging with whatever this message has surfaced, capturing specific moments of clarity, specific fears, specific small steps taken. This record becomes valuable later, offering concrete evidence of genuine movement, something to look back on during moments when progress feels invisible or uncertain. Here is something worth understanding about the specific danger of comparing your particular journey to someone else's. Your avoidance, your fear, your specific circumstances are entirely your own. Someone else's apparent ease in facing similar situations does not diminish how genuinely difficult your own particular situation actually is. Release that comparison. Focus entirely on your own honest next step, measured only against where you personally started. Here is something worth understanding about setbacks specifically, since they are likely to occur as you continue moving forward from today. You may take that first step, feel genuine relief, and then slip back into old avoidance a few days later. This does not erase the progress already made. Simply begin again. Return to this message if needed. Let it pull you forward again, exactly as many times as it takes. Here is something worth understanding about children, family members, or anyone who looks up to you, if such a person exists in your life. They are watching how you handle difficulty, whether they say so directly or not. What you model for them teaches more than any words ever could. Consider what you want them to learn from watching you today. Let that consideration add weight to your decision to finally act. Here is something worth understanding about the specific difference between shame and honest accountability. Shame says something is wrong with you. Honest accountability simply says something needs to change. One paralyzes. The other moves you forward. Choose accountability. Leave shame entirely behind. Here is something worth understanding about the very smallest possible version of movement, since it often feels almost too modest to count. Sometimes the most immediately achievable action feels insignificant, yet these smaller starting points prove far more sustainable than larger, more intimidating steps that end up postponed indefinitely. Break your particular step down further if necessary, until it feels genuinely manageable within the actual constraints of your day-to-day. Here is something worth understanding about the specific qualities that make someone genuinely helpful during this particular process. Ideally, this person listens without immediately rushing to fix everything. Someone who does not flinch when things get uncomfortable. Someone whose presence makes honesty feel safer rather than harder. If a specific person came to mind, consider reaching out to them today, even with something as simple as, "I need to talk to you about something." Here is something worth understanding about the specific relationship between rest and readiness throughout this particular process. You cannot keep pouring from an empty container indefinitely. If exhaustion has been quietly building underneath everything else this message has addressed, that exhaustion deserves direct attention too. Consider what genuine rest would actually look like for you specifically, not the idealized version other people describe, but the version that would genuinely restore something running on empty. Here is something worth understanding about the specific power of small, repeated choices over time. You do not need to solve everything touched on within a single day. What actually works, consistently, is small, repeated choice, one honest moment today, another tomorrow, slowly accumulating into something genuinely different than where you started. Here is something worth understanding about the specific danger perfectionism might pose as you move forward from today. If you find yourself believing today's insight must immediately produce flawless, permanent change, release that expectation right now. Progress will be messy. You will have good days and harder days. All of that is normal. Here is something worth understanding about the specific role your relationship with uncertainty plays throughout this process, since some people navigate uncertainty relatively comfortably while others find it consistently more challenging. If uncertainty feels particularly difficult for you personally, this awareness can help you approach this particular matter with appropriate self-compassion. Here is something worth understanding about the specific fear of being genuinely seen, since this fear often operates quietly beneath the surface of ordinary daily avoidance. Somewhere inside you, a part may worry what would happen if people actually knew the full weight of what you have been carrying. That fear is understandable. It is also, more often than not, inaccurate. Consider testing that theory, gently, with one person you trust even slightly. You may be surprised by what actually happens. Here is something worth understanding about the specific relationship between honesty and connection. People who hide significant parts of themselves often describe feeling lonely even while surrounded by others, precisely because genuine connection requires being genuinely known, and being genuinely known requires the exact honesty this message has been encouraging throughout its content. Here is something worth understanding about the specific timeline this kind of change realistically requires. Unrealistic expectations regarding how quickly significant change typically develops often lead to premature discouragement. Genuine transformation, particularly for matters that have gone unaddressed for an extended period, typically unfolds gradually rather than resolving completely within a single day. This does not diminish the significance of what beginning today actually accomplishes. Beginning is itself significant, often the most difficult part of any genuine process of change. Here is something worth understanding about the specific role that self-trust plays throughout this entire process. Genuine, timely action ultimately requires trusting your own capacity to navigate whatever unfolds once that action has actually been taken. Many people, caught in extended postponement, are actually struggling less with uncertainty about what they want, and more with uncertainty about their own capability. Reflect honestly on whether this describes your own particular situation, drawing on specific past instances where you successfully navigated significant challenges despite initial uncertainty. Here is something worth understanding about what specific systems might support consistent, ongoing action, rather than relying purely on the initial burst of motivation this morning has hopefully provided. Consider a regular check-in, an accountability partner, or a simple, consistent daily practice, something that does not depend entirely on fluctuating internal motivation to sustain itself. Here is something worth understanding about the specific weight of unspoken hopes, since many people carry desires they have never actually spoken aloud, even to themselves. If something specific has remained unspoken within you, consider speaking it now, silently or aloud, however feels right. There is real power in simply naming a hope clearly, rather than allowing it to remain vague and unformed, floating somewhere in the back of your mind without ever receiving the dignity of clear expression. Here is something worth understanding about the specific significance of consistency over intensity. A single, intense burst of motivation, however powerful it feels this morning, rarely produces lasting change on its own. What actually produces lasting change is consistency, showing up repeatedly, even in smaller ways, day after day. Here is something worth understanding about what specific evidence of genuine progress you might reasonably look for over the coming weeks, evidence confirming authentic movement is actually occurring, even when that movement unfolds gradually rather than through one dramatic moment. Perhaps a growing sense of lightness connected to whatever matter you have begun addressing. Here is something worth understanding about what specific role continued reflection and reassessment might play as this process continues unfolding beyond today. Genuine engagement with significant matters rarely proceeds in a perfectly smooth line from initial recognition through complete resolution. It typically involves periods of clear progress alongside periods where the path forward becomes temporarily less obvious. Give yourself genuine permission for this kind of ongoing reassessment, distinguishing it clearly from the pattern of postponement this message has been addressing throughout its content. Here is something worth understanding about what your particular relationship with this matter might look like 1 year from today, looking forward with genuine intention rather than simply hoping passively that circumstances will resolve themselves without your continued, active participation. Here is something worth understanding about what specific people in your life, beyond simply the one supportive individual already discussed, might benefit from knowing about your genuine commitment to this particular matter. This does not require sharing every detail with everyone. It simply invites consideration of whether broader, appropriate transparency might serve your continued engagement more effectively. Here is something worth understanding about what specific fears or hesitations from your own particular history have most consistently prevented similar significant engagement in the past. Whatever specific pattern has most consistently interfered with your previous attempts, name it clearly now, and consider what specific strategy might help you navigate around this particular pattern more effectively this time. Here is something worth understanding about what genuine celebration might look like once you have taken that first concrete step, recognizing that acknowledging genuine progress, however small, tends to reinforce continued engagement far more effectively than moving immediately toward the next challenge without ever genuinely registering what has already been accomplished. Here is something worth understanding about the specific role spiritual or philosophical practice might play in supporting your continued engagement, whether prayer, meditation, or simply consistent reflection connected to whatever framework genuinely resonates with your own particular worldview. Many people find that periods of significant challenge naturally deepen this kind of engagement, precisely because these periods tend to surface exactly the kind of larger questions such practice has traditionally helped people navigate. Here is something worth understanding about the specific weight of comparison to other people who seem to have already taken similar steps successfully, wondering why it has taken you so much longer to reach this same point of readiness. Release that comparison as well. Your particular timing, shaped by your own particular circumstances, history, and capacity, deserves respect rather than judgment against an external, unrelated standard. Here is something worth understanding about the specific role that written commitment might play in solidifying today's resolve, actually writing down, in your own handwriting or your own typed words, exactly what you intend to do and by when. This simple act of commitment often increases the likelihood of genuine follow-through considerably more than simply holding the intention silently in your mind. Here is something worth understanding about the specific significance of telling at least one other person about your intended step, since accountability shared with another person, even briefly, tends to strengthen commitment considerably more than intentions held entirely privately, however genuine those private intentions may be. Here is something worth understanding about the specific role that reflecting on your own core values plays throughout this process, since values clarified honestly often provide the clearest, most sustainable motivation for difficult action, considerably more reliable than motivation based purely on temporary emotion or external pressure. Here is something worth understanding about the specific danger of waiting for a crisis to force your hand, since many people only finally take significant, necessary action once circumstances become so severe that action becomes unavoidable. Consider what it would mean to act now, from genuine choice, rather than later, from genuine necessity. Here is something worth understanding about the specific role that reflecting on people who have already walked a similar path can play, drawing encouragement and practical wisdom from others who have successfully faced similar difficult steps and situations, rather than assuming your own particular difficulty is entirely without precedent or guidance. Here is something worth understanding about the specific role gratitude plays even in the middle of difficult, unresolved circumstances, not gratitude that denies genuine struggle, but gratitude that exists honestly alongside it, offering a small but genuine counterbalance to whatever heaviness this particular season has been carrying. Here is something worth understanding about the specific significance of small rituals marking meaningful transitions, whether lighting a candle after finally having a difficult conversation, or taking a quiet walk after finally making a long-postponed decision. These small, personal rituals help mark genuine progress in ways that pure mental acknowledgement sometimes fails to fully register. Here is something worth understanding about the specific role your own body plays throughout this entire process, since genuine readiness and genuine peace often register physically before they fully register mentally. Notice, right now, whether your body feels any different than it did when this message began. A little lighter, perhaps. A little less tense. That physical shift, however small, is real information, evidence that something within you is already responding to what this message has been offering. Here is something worth understanding about the specific weight of expectations you may have been placing on other people to notice your struggle without you ever directly communicating it. Many people wait, quietly, hoping someone will simply notice how hard things have been, rather than directly asking for the support they actually need. Consider whether this pattern has been present in your own particular situation. If it has, consider what it might mean to finally ask directly, clearly, for whatever specific support you genuinely need, rather than continuing to wait for someone else to somehow guess it on their own. Here is something worth understanding about the specific danger of isolation as you continue this process beyond today. Difficulty tends to convince a person that they are the only one experiencing exactly this particular struggle, that no one else could possibly understand. This is rarely actually true, even when it feels completely true in the moment. Somewhere, someone else has walked something remarkably similar to whatever you are currently walking. Consider seeking out that connection, whether through a support group, an online community focused on similar struggles, or simply through more honest conversation with people already present in your life. Here is something worth understanding about the specific role of forgiveness in this process, whether forgiveness of yourself, forgiveness of someone else, or both simultaneously. If resentment or self-blame has been quietly present alongside whatever this message has helped you notice, consider whether that resentment or self-blame genuinely continues serving you, or whether it has simply become another weight adding to everything else you are already carrying. Forgiveness does not require forgetting, excusing genuine harm, or immediate reconciliation. It simply means releasing some of the ongoing weight that continued resentment tends to place specifically on you, the person carrying it. Here is something worth understanding about the specific significance of consistency over intensity as you continue moving forward. A single, intense burst of motivation, however powerful it feels today, rarely produces lasting change on its own. What actually produces lasting change is consistency, showing up repeatedly, even in smaller, less dramatic ways, day after day, week after week. Consider what a sustainable, consistent practice might look like for you specifically, something you could genuinely maintain even on difficult days, rather than an ambitious, intense commitment likely to be abandoned within the first week once initial motivation naturally begins to fade. Here is something worth understanding about the specific weight of comparison to your own past self, the version of you who may have handled similar situations differently, whether more capably or less capably. Release that comparison as well. You are not competing with an earlier version of yourself. You are simply continuing forward from wherever you genuinely stand today. Here is something worth understanding about the specific role continued self-compassion plays as you develop this particular practice, since old patterns of avoidance, especially those reinforced over many years, do not typically dissolve entirely through a single moment of recognition like this reflection alone. If old patterns resurface periodically, even after this particular message, meet them with patience rather than harsh self-criticism. Here is something worth understanding about what genuinely changes once you have finally begun engaging with this particular matter, translating urgency into concrete action rather than continuing the pattern of postponement that has likely characterized your relationship with it until now. Many people report significant relief following genuine engagement, even when that engagement involves real, ongoing challenges and difficulties that do not immediately and completely resolve simply through the act of beginning. This relief stems not from the absence of difficulty, but from the absence of the particular exhaustion that prolonged avoidance and postponement typically produces, mental and emotional energy previously consumed by continued deliberation becoming available instead for the different, often more manageable work of actually engaging with whatever genuine challenges this particular matter involves once directly addressed. Here is something worth understanding about the specific relationship between action and identity, since taking this particular step, however small, begins to shift how you see yourself, from someone who avoids difficult things towards someone who faces them honestly, even when facing them feels genuinely uncomfortable. This identity shift matters considerably, extending well beyond this single situation into how you approach future difficulties as well, once you have proven to yourself that you are genuinely capable of this kind of honest, courageous engagement. Here is something worth understanding about the specific role that patience with the broader process plays, distinct from patience with any single specific outcome. You may take this first step today and still face considerable work ahead before the underlying situation fully resolves. That continued work does not indicate that today's step was somehow insufficient or unsuccessful. It simply reflects the genuine, ongoing nature of significant change. Here is something worth understanding about the specific significance of today's particular alignment, whatever circumstances specifically brought you to reading this exact message at this exact moment. Consider what it would mean to trust that this alignment carries genuine significance, rather than dismissing it as simply coincidental or irrelevant to your actual circumstances. Here is something worth understanding about the specific significance of this particular reflection reaching its natural conclusion, not because everything has been fully resolved, but because sufficient clarity has now been offered for you to genuinely begin, trusting that continued clarity will develop further through the very process of engaging honestly with whatever this message has helped you identify. Thank you for opening this before it was too late. Be gentle with yourself as you begin, one honest step at a time.